because
And I believe it was the calm mindset too. So it was actually a whole different dichotomy of Terrapagos as well.
Okay, so I think we have to put Terrapagos on fraud alert.
No, I actually think it's the other way around. I think Terrapagos has actually been doing pretty well. Speaking of which, we actually have a Terrapagos team on Adit Salvaraj's side. Pretty similar to the one we saw from Hunter last round. Some notable differences are that instead of Dark Pulse, it's Sleep Talk on the Terrapagos.
And instead of Life Orb, it's the Dragon Fang on Regidrago. But essentially, it looks like everything is very similar to Hunter's team, which makes you wonder if Adit and Hunter built this team together.
I wouldn't be surprised of either outcome. I know Adit has very, very connected in a bunch of team building groups, and he's got a lot of results under his belt. I wouldn't be surprised if that's just a natural conclusion that both of them had reached, even if they didn't build together.
And meanwhile, we see Matt Laughlin's team, and we've got an Eternatus on our screen.
That's a fun one.
We haven't seen a Zamazenta, we haven't seen a Zacian, but we also know that those, as you guys saw on the usage rate, those 8 restricted legendaries, ladies and gentlemen, that you saw in the break, those are the only 8 restricteds we have here. So we don't see either of the dogs. We see the Pokemon that they were tasked with stopping.
Yep. That being said, a funny thing to note is that Dynamax is not in this game. Dynamax Cannon literally is just a move. It's like how Behemoth Bash and Behemoth Blade are as well. So I guess in this case, just Cannon.
I think so, because there actually is something that I want to bring up after this game if we do see Dynamax Cannon hit that was a little bit of a contention and a minor debate that I had with some VGC friends of mine that actually, you know, while we're waiting, we can say about it. Dynamax Cannon, Behemoth Blade, and Behemoth Bash. Do you think they should have had a secondary effect being like how Collision Course and Electro Drift are, that how those moves are, if they're super effective, it does extra damage. But in the case of Dynamax Cannon, Behemoth Blade, and Behemoth Bash, they are like Stellar Terra, that they're super effective against terrestrialized Pokemon.
I don't think it would have been the case of that because Mechanica is just fundamentally different from Dynamaxing.
Well, we see game number 1 is coming out here. We see Tornadus and Eternatus coming out on the side of Matthew Laughlin versus Urshifu, Rapid Strike, and Whimsicott for Adit Selvaraj.
And an interesting thing about Eternatus in this is typically it runs like a Toxic Stall set with Cosmic Power and Recover. One actually opts for a Life Orb set for just generally really strong damage because Poison Dragon's actually a pretty solid offensive type. Fluttermane, Fluttermane like we've been saying. Ogerpon stocks have been picking up. And just Poison Dragon is like a really good neutral type, especially when like back half of your team is just pretty good at dealing with steals.
Well, Adidas opted to activate his Terra Orb, and Urshifu turns into a pure water type here. And it is the Choice Scarf variant, so whatever move it clicks will actually be the move of choice. But we do see a Tailwind coming out from the side of
both of them.
So we have double Tailwind out onto this field. And Urshifu, I think, will be faster. It is faster than the Eternatus. It goes Surging Strikes into the Eternatus. That is a resisted critical hit.
Water as well.
And it's just bouncing off of that Eternatus.
I think even after Life Orb chip as well, you actually would still be able to take this pretty well.
Eternatus going for that Dynamax Cannon into Urshifu. Will this do enough? It actually does, and Matt Laughlin gets a one-shot knockout on the first turn with that Eternatus. That is insane damage, Matt.
I agree. Like, it's one of those, I would say Eternatus is kind of similar to certain Pokemon like Duskmane, Necrozma, like Lunala, Pokemon like that, where it's like, their damage output isn't going to be as flashy as these Pokemon like Calyrexes that can snowball, like Koraidon, Miraidon that have a lot of immediate damage. Eternatus kind of tends to use its bulk with the Poison Dragon typing and its high HP stat. Putting out consistent high damage.
Now, the other thing to note is that this Whimsicott does have Encore. Encore has been a really good move on Whimsicott in early Regulation G because it forces Tornadus into using the last move it chose, and in this case, is that Tailwind. But we do see Sludge Bomb come out onto the Whimsicott here, brings it down to its Focus Sash. There's a 30% chance for a poison here. Will it happen? It does!
It does?
There's a poison on the Whimsicott!
That goes Oh, because the item proc first.
The item
Okay, that's my
the focus
bad.
ash comes down as we do see the tailwind come out, but now it's not going to do anything because it's not a prankster move. And Terra Starstorm coming out onto this Eternatus, and it goes down. The Choice Specs Terra Starstorm ends up knocking out that Eternatus, but Eternatus did its job because his Whimsicott is going down to that poison, man.
An interesting thing to note, actually, is because that Tornadus was actually going for Bleak Wind Storm, the Tailwind was actually at the priority of the Bleak Wind.
Ooh, that's a good point to note. But also, Aditz used his Terra here, so now Terra Starstorm is just going to be a single target move. Now, that's good because it doesn't mean that it takes the spread damage, but it also is a negative on Matt's on Aditz's side because it won't do as much damage, especially if Natty opts to go for a Terra here. And we see the Fluttermane coming out on the side of Matthew Laughlin, and Adit has that Ogerpon Hearthflame in the back.
All right, and then...
Now, now here's the interesting thing. Matt's Fluttermane is the Choice Specs variant. So, essentially, Matt could go for any move here, and it'll do good damage. But if Matt opts to Terrasilize Fluttermane into, say, the Terra Fairy, all of a sudden Terra Starstorm, which is what Adit's locked into, it'll hit that Fluttermane.
Oh, yeah. The other thing to be worried about, too, is Fluttermane cannot protect. Your Tornadus is locked into spamming Tailwind. It's actually a very scary scenario of trying to make sure that your Pokemon are going to be able to withstand these moves, because...
As we see Chi-Yu comes out onto the field, we see the Fish is on the field, and those Beads of Ruin are activated.
I could be led to believe that this is a Shadow Ball coming into the Ogerpon Hearthflame to try to mitigate some of the potential damage that it can do.
It's possible here, but we do see the Terra Fairy come out on the Fluttermane.
This could be Moonblast into the Terrapagos to try to pick it up in one clean shot, too.
Which is a possibility here. Oh, no, it just goes Dazzling Gleam. The Dazzling Gleam is the move of choice on Fluttermane here. As the Specs Dazzling Gleam, how much damage is this going to do to both Pokemon? It is resisted over 50% to the Ogerpon, but that was a critical hit as well as Ivy Cudgel coming out into the Fluttermane.
And it tanks it.
It does tank it here, but Terra Starstorm comes out into the Chi-Yu slot here, and it tanks it as well.
And now the important thing, too, is that Terra Shell's broken, which means this could potentially just be curtains for the Terrapagos.
It very well could be here, but also what's important to note is that the Fluttermane is the fastest Pokemon on the field here. I actually know that Chi-Yu because it's Choice Scarf, and the Dazzling Gleam comes out on the Fluttermane here. Choice Specs, Terra Fairy, Beads of Ruin, does enough to knock out the Ogerpon Hearthflame
and that's just game.
And the Terrapagos, and Matt Laughlin wins game number 1 of this best of 3 in round number 5. He is one step closer to that top cut.
Oh, yeah. That's Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, that's an explosive core that we've known since they were legal together in Regulation C.
And we said it with Chen Pao and Dragonite. People think of Chen Pao Dragonite for the physical side, but we have to remember Fluttermane Chi-Yu is that special side.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, you know, we do a moment of silence for Ting Lu and Wo Chen.
Ting Lu I've seen popping up around as, like, a really good option. And it was, like, back when Calyrex Shadow was, like, still, like, everywhere. And even, like, in some Miraidon scenarios.
Well, in terms of, like
it's just more specific.
Well, I mean, the Reg C combination. So we do a moment of silence for Ting Lu and Wo Chen. But right now, Wo Chen is having a little bit of an uptick because it technically does well against Calyrex Shadow right now.
This is actually a really good example of what I was saying before of, like, offensive power of Eternatus next to Fluttermane Chi-Yu just kind of just helps round out the rest of the coverage. And as you can tell, like, the Matt's team is actually more focused on, like, just consistent high damage output rather than, like, explosive one-shots. Although we did see that one-shot pick up on the Urshifu.
Exactly right, and that was Life Orb boosted as well. But that Eternatus barely took any damage from the Surging Strikes too, mind you.
That's one thing you got to remember, is that Eternatus has a deceptively high HP stat, which means if it's into resist, that means if you just train, like, some of the defense onto Eternatus, you can actually start taking Surging Strikes very well just with how the damage from that move works.
Definitely right there.
Looks like we're getting into game 2, actually. Whoa, I moved the cord slightly and it fixed my audio.
I think you're fine here because we're going to get into game number 2 here as Matt Laughlin opts to switch out the Eternatus for Fluttermane next to his Tornadus here, but we see the Terrapagos opt for the lead on the side of Adit alongside that Whimsicott.
This is a very interesting scenario to think of because you can technically get your Tailwind up with Tornadus, but then you risk getting Encored. There's also the alternative where you could just try to put damage out now.
Just see Matt opting for the Terra here on turn 1. Going for that Terra into Fluttermane here, just get more damage on Fluttermane, which makes total sense here.
What you're going to try to do here is break the Terra Shell if possible, or force the Terraform Zero out, and just try to make sure that you're trying to do damage before you get Encore locked into something.
We see Moonblast come out as the move of choice into the Terrapagos here. This is actually going to be very interesting because now that the Terra Shell is going to be broken, Tornadus is opting for that Bleak Witch, but that special attack drop
that
is
is
big.
Actually huge.
That's huge because now the choice specs is negated in terms of damage here, but the Bleak Wind Storm missed on Terrapagos. That is really massive as the Terra Starstorm comes out on the side of Adit Selvaraj and doing over 50% to that Tornadus.
I think this is still a fine scenario though, just because you broke the Terra Shell, which means Whimsicott either has to set its own Tailwind or Encore you so that you can't click Tailwind.
The Tailwind come out on the side of Adit, getting that Tailwind up here. Did Matt opt for the Tailwind of his own? He did opt for the Tailwind of his own. So now this Fluttermane is locked into that Moonblast, and it's choice specs Terra Fairy. Will Terrapagos survive this hit?
It will not.
It will not. It will not, and that Terrapagos is down. And it also showed how important that special attack drop was on the Moonblast from that first turn, because Tornadus might have gone down on that first turn.
All right, so we see the Urshifu Rapid Strike coming in as well. The Whimsicott's in a prime position to click in Encore into the Tornadus here. If you're in Matt's spot, you want to swap out the Tornadus,
and we do see
just try to be proactive with it because you do know you're getting Encore there.
We do see a switch out here into Eternatus of all things. I was actually thinking that maybe there'd be a Chi-Yu coming out into that slot, but as it turns out, I was a little wrong there. But
with the Urshifu threatening damage into either slot, I think it was probably worth going for it because even if you lose the Fluttermane this turn, you have Eternatus into position next turn, and Urshifu would be Choice Scarf locked into a move that the Eternatus resists.
See the Encore come out, but it does fail, and this Fluttermane actually is not faster than the Urshifu because of the Tailwind and the Choice Scarf. And this Fluttermane,
it looks like it's going to go down to the Surging Strikes, but that's fine. I figured that Matt figured that he was probably losing something this turn. So he may as well be able to put the Eternatus into a position, leverage that resistance to the Surging Strikes in such a way that you can get the Urshifu off the field. And it leaves the Whimsicott that I believe has already had its sash broken. It was in range of just anything else.
I actually don't think it had the Focus Sash broken yet, Matt, because it protected that first turn. So now this Tornadus comes out here.
Oh, it hasn't.
So now this is a very interesting situation. Matt's Terra is gone, but Adit's Terra is now on the field. We know that this Tornadus is holding the Rocky Helmet. So any move that Adit clicks, if he goes into the Eternatus,
it does nothing. But if he clicks the Tornadus,
he takes damage.
It takes a little bit of chip damage. I think it at one shot or one Surging Strike might actually pick up the Torn from here.
Oh, and we see a Sunny
Change
Day.
of plan.
Ooh, that's something. See the Sunny Day come out here. This is Terra Water Surging Strikes in the sun into that Tornadus. Okay, it will take
all 3 hits of Rocky Helmet from what it looks like.
It probably will, as we do see.
Which means here that you don't necessarily have to. You could probably have played to cover like a potential switch or something.
I think you're right because now this Tornadus down, but Urshifu took major damage there.
An interesting thing to note as well is because the Eternatus is on field, the moment that attacks start getting directed into it, will start consuming more PP, which it's not going to matter in this scenario because the Eternatus took out the Urshifu. But if it got into an endgame where the Urshifu was locked into Surging Strikes against the Eternatus, it'd actually be losing 2 PP per turn, which means at most would have 4 Surging Strikes to work with, which would lock you into struggle.
We see Urshifu on the side of Matt. That is his last Pokemon.
It's a single strike.
It's single strike Urshifu versus this Ogerpon Heartflame. Now both sides' Terras are done for the remainder of this battle. However, there's an encore potentially coming out on that Eternatus, and if it does get encored, all of a sudden, Matt can't hit that Whimsicott.
I don't think it's that bad of a scenario, though, because the Whimsicott, I don't think can do as much damage back, and in Matt's position, what he just has to do right now is just get the Ogerpon off the field, because once Matt runs out of Dynamax cannons, for example, if he's encored into that, the encore will immediately end, and he can actually just click a different move into the Whimsicott.
Okay, see, that's something that I didn't know. So we do see a Detect come out on the side of Urshifu, potentially trying to get away from a encore here, but that's actually interesting. But we do see Sludge Bomb come out, and it goes into the Ogerpon, and Ogerpon is down. I'm trying to figure out what happened here. I think he went for encore. Okay, there's something that we just got told in the microphone, guys. Apparently, encore fails against Dynamax Cannon. Well, okay, that's something I didn't know about. Okay.
I wish I could communicate my confusion.
I could as well. That is something that I don't think
you pick up something new every single day when you play Pokemon, I guess.
Dude, I mean, congratulations to Mad Laughlin. He moves to 4-1, and he essentially locks up a spot.
I don't think they knew about the interaction either.
I don't think they did either. That is something that I don't think any of us knew about. So encore fails against Dynamax Cannon. But why? Now I'm having more questions than there are answers.
It might just be one of those things where certain Pokemon just kind of get like the special treatment when it comes to their signature moves or abilities. Because I know when it comes to Lunala and Solgaleo, I'm pretty sure their abilities actually are not ignored by Molebreaker.
I don't believe they are either on...
That's a very interesting one to think of, though. Like, found it out here first, folks.
We've now learned a new mechanic that, I mean, now for anybody that's going to LA Regionals, well,
good thing to know potentially.
That's something to.
It requires you to run into an Eternatus on the field, which right now isn't the most common, but it's something potentially worth considering.
Exactly, because you don't anticipate Encore to fail.
Just a regular move.
You know it fails on a Dark type Pokemon because of the Prankster.
But then it didn't hit into Protect.
No, it just failed, which is very interesting. It's one of those scenarios that, is it a glitch? Is it not a glitch? Is it a missed thing of the coding? Like, who knows?
Well, that's going to be one thing that we have to hit the research on, because we don't know if that's a unique mechanic to Generation 9.
Could even be that, because as we did find out, Dynamax Cannon was actually not in our production database coming into this, or coming into last week. So that actually is something to note.
It might also just be one of those things where there's just specific Pokemon interactions that have happened as well, because I know I had something happen to me in Orlando, speaking of unique interactions, I was running a Gouging Fire, I was running a variation of James Evans' Gouging Fire team, and something I learned is, you already know the interaction that if neutralizing gas is on the field, photosynthesis doesn't proc, right? And you know the interaction that specifically with the DLC Paradox Mons, they can have their boost knocked off.
Yeah.
Something I learned from that round was that specifically if you have like a photosynthesis DLC Mon on the field and the Weezing's on the field, you remove the Weezing, typically the booster energy should proc, right?
Yeah, right.
Not for the DLC Mons. So I actually had lost a set to that happening, and it wasn't that I never actually found out how like the booster would proc afterwards, because my Gouging Fire got its booster energy immediately knocked off right after.
Yeah, like
so it's going to be one of those things. Probably that's a very specific Pokemon interaction that we just learned.
Yeah, that we just learned. I mean, again, congratulations to Mad Laughlin for essentially locking up a spot in Top Cut.
That is just a lock in the Top Cut, I think.
Yeah, 4-1. That's a really good record for this midseason showdown. Getting closer to those all important championship points as the season is winding down. Matt,
I think actually getting into top 8, I think will guarantee him some.
I think you're right. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back with Top Cut. So don't go anywhere from the Nerdy Needs Midseason Showdown here in Brandon, Florida. Our
Grab some
Top
water.
Cut, yes, hydrate if you need to, because these Top Cut matches are going to be intense.